if it wasn't for an inappropriate priest, I wouldn't be doing matrimonial law. But that's kind of the truth, and that was almost 30 years ago. So here we are.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Satova, your host of Beyond the Bar podcast. And as we had many guests, over 150 guests, and I realized, and somebody actually said it, that they sort of felt unhurried, and I love that. So the show is really about unhurried conversations with people who built something, real stories, past the headlines, the resumes, the titles. So my guest today has practiced matrimonial and family law on Long Island for nearly 30 years. He doesn't look it, and that's a compliment. But before he ever opened his own doors, he ran the law department for the Nassau County District Court, supervising legal research for over, I think it was like 26 judges. But he launched his own firm in 2004 despite of that, and he's been recognized as a top 100 lawyer in the New York metro area. He gives his time generously to We Care, the charitable arm of the Nassau County Bar. And it's really my pleasure to get to know him better. His name is Jerome Scharoff. We call him Jerry. So Jerry, welcome to Beyond the Bar podcast.
Thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited. Thank you.
Finally, right?
Yes, finally. I know we tried to, we were going to do it about a year ago, and schedules got mixed up. And then I was ribbing your husband walking into the Bar Association one day, and then I got a call the next day. So I'll have to continue to do that, I guess.
Yes, you do. That's right. You want something, you go after it. We had a nice little warm up actually just a little bit ago, sort of reminiscing. I don't want to say reminiscing about COVID as though we want it back, but it's sort of how it was a chaos, right? Everybody just, trying to stitch the Zooms together and sort of to continue their sort of a workflows.
Yeah.
And you were telling me a story. You were on Zoom in front of a judge. What happened?
Yeah, well, it was during COVID, and obviously the world was upside down. And like a lot of other people, I had gotten a puppy. So I was having a court appearance in front of Judge Joseph, one of your guests, I believe. And my dog was quiet all day, except when I had to go on the record. And then she started barking. And Judge Joseph said, "Oh, Mr. Scharoff, do you have somebody else there?" And I said, "Yes, hold on one second." And I picked up my dog and I said, "Bailey Scharoff," and I put her appearance on the record. And then we went on with the case. So, yes.
That's too cute. And it's so human.
Yeah.
And we've had retired judges and we had other practitioners, and we had the dogs and the barking and we had the cussing and the
Yep.
dogs and the
Yep.
teenage kids. So yeah, we had it all. Well,
Yeah.
Jerry,
Yes.
it's not so much about, what do you do today, but and we'll get to it, but I'm always interested about your story. Who were you before all of this, and why do you do, first of all, how did you get here, and why do you do what you do?
Sure. Well, I guess you can say being a lawyer is the family business. My grandfather, who I never knew, he passed away before I was born. He was a lawyer. He was a chief counsel for Royal Globe Insurance, and my father became a lawyer, and he ultimately became a judge. He passed away before. He passed away when I was in law school, but I was in law school at the time, and I had always wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know that I was always going to be a matrimonial lawyer per se, but that's where my path took me. My was waiting for a job at the time with the county attorney's office, and the application was kind of sitting. And I was at a function, and there was a family court judge that came up to me and said, "What are you doing with yourself?" I said, "Well, I'm waiting for a job." And he couldn't believe that I hadn't gotten a job through the county attorney's office yet. I'd only taken the bar exam in July. It was now October, and things in government move slow at times. And he said, I want you in my chambers Monday with resumes. And the first person that came in was someone from Dominic Barber's office. And he said, give this to him, tell him to keep the kid busy. So a few days later, I go down to his office and he says, okay, we'll keep you busy. Go work on this project, go work on that project. And I passed the bar exam and, a few weeks later and still working there. And a husband and wife came to see him. They went to a priest for marital counseling, and the priest ended up sleeping with the wife. So I did a whole memo. I came in
Yeah.
on the weekend, and Dominic at the time said, who helped you with this? I said, I did it myself. And he said, this is great. Why don't you stay? I'll pay you X amount. I'll give you X amount of what you bring in, and you should just work here. So I took a day, and I said, this is a really good opportunity. And if it wasn't for an inappropriate priest, I wouldn't be doing matrimonial law. But that's kind of the truth, and that was almost 30 years ago. So here we are.
Damn, that really sticks. That could make for a really great clickbaitable.
Yes, yes, yes. I would like
Wow.
to tell you I got into it because I, wanted to help everyone, and I'm sure there's an element of that. But my real introduction into it was, at that first job, and I learned a lot, and I continued to learn a lot working for, a couple different people over the beginning of my career, and really picked up a lot, and that enabled me to kind of go out on my own and, have my firm for the amount of time that I have.
Yeah, I mean, you did research for so many judges, and to start your own firm. I mean, that's not easy. What made you decide to do that?
Sure. Well, I mean, like I said, the first job was the story that I just told you, and I wasn't sure I wanted to continue to do matrimonial work, so I ended up in the law department of district court, and I was there for a couple of years, and there was a hiring freeze there at the time, so our supervisor, who had gone to another position, they couldn't, I guess officially give me the line, as they say, but the supervising judge says, you should be in charge. And, it was, I learned a lot. I learned how to work with the judges. I learned that what they look for, and people I met there, I'm still friends with to this day, and built contacts and a network. So I was there for a few years, and then I left, and I actually went to go work at Steve Gassman's office, and then shortly after I wasn't working at Steve's office anymore, I went out on my own, and it kind of just happened.
Mm.
I was sharing, so somebody introduced me to another attorney, Lenny Sperber, who I'm sure you know, and someone introduced me to him, and Lenny said, well, why don't you work on this motion for me? And, why don't you go make these appearances for me? And, I have an office here. Why don't you just take it and work out of it, and we'll figure something out? And, then I started getting referrals, and I started getting cases. And next thing I knew, I had my own firm. So that's kind of how it happened. And, it's been a very, rewarding experience for sure.
Sounds like, when I asked you about your story and how you got into the law, you said, well, it was, you were sort of almost predisposition with your father, your
Mhm.
grandfather. And then even now, when you're saying, well, I just kind of took that step and that led me to the next step, and it just kind of sort of happened. It sounds like you have stayed open to the next opportunity, and not resisting. When you sort of look back as you transition, on your own, are there any things you would have done differently?
Um, I guess being a young lawyer and a young entrepreneur, I probably didn't take enough chances at first. If I have to be reflective, I've been running my own practice since 2004. And in 2020, I went to go join a firm thinking that that would be a new opportunity and a good opportunity. And I was there for 3 years, and it just wasn't for me at that point. And went back out on my own in 2023, but I really had a lot of perspective from my first time doing it on my own. When I joined this other firm, I didn't have to join the firm, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity. So when I decided that, really wanted to go back out on my own, I said I wasn't going to be as conservative in terms of hiring and I guess investing into the business of law. There's what we practice and then there's the whole business side to it. And they don't really teach you about that in law school. But I said I really wanted to, not be as conservative and, not being reckless in investing in the business, but being more open to investing in the business, whether it's hiring more people or marketing or whatever it may be. And so far, it's really been beneficial. And you get better because you'll have hindsight from what you've done in the past. So it's been since I've gone back out in 2023, it's really been it's been very exciting and really enjoyable.
So it sounds like you feel you made the right decision and having a new fresh perspective. Because it's not easy. You're right. You have to become sort of you become you ultimately delegate some things, but other than that, it's the bookkeeper and then the like you said, the marketing, bringing in the business and
Yes.
and then trying to figure out and navigate the social media and then doing the work and then being an HR person. And it's just there's so much.
Yeah,
So much.
there's a book, and I might butcher it a little bit. I think it's called The E-Myth Revisited, and I read
Yes.
it many years ago. And again, I might not get it 100%, but from what I recall, it was bringing you along of somebody opening up a muffin shop, and you can't be the person who's baking the muffins, who are marketing the bakery and the bookkeeper. So in our world, there's the tactician, the person who's doing the work, there's running the firm. So there's a lot of different hats you have to wear, and you need to be able to have people that you trust and that you can delegate to, so that you can handle what needs to be done on all fronts.
What would you call a major setback in your life and sort of a coming back from it and,
Sure.
learning from that?
Sure. I guess there are probably two or three major setbacks that I can think of. I lost my father when I was 24, 25, I guess it was 24, I think. I was at the end of my second year of law school. So, not only was he my father, he was an attorney, he was a judge, he had a great network. So I lost that from him. He'd been sick for a few years, and I was basically I was about to take my finals my second year in law school when he passed, which was expected, but obviously that's an obvious setback. And I didn't wallow in it. I've heard the expression, why me, why me, why not you, right? No one has dispensation to not unfortunately have something negative happen to you. So, that was certainly a setback, and you just have to power through. And I certainly did that. And although he wasn't here, he was always here because there was so many people that knew him. Even early on in my career, I would give my name, and that was actually my grandfather's name. And my dad had named me exactly for his father, which is unusual in the Jewish faith. We usually just use the first letter, but my grandfather was Jerome Scharoff. So early on in my career, I would say my name, and people said, I haven't heard that name in 40 years. So
Wow.
for a long time, not as much anymore, but the early parts of my career, really up until a few years ago, there would be a lot of people, they would hear my last name and they would ask any relation. So that's always given me great comfort knowing that he was always there. So that was certainly one setback. Another setback, I went through my own divorce about 8, 9 years ago, and nobody ever draws it up that way. Obviously, I have to have a little levity about the situation. I joke that it was an expensive work study because I became a much better lawyer for it.
Yeah.
And no matter how much we think we know what our clients need, and we might understand the technical aspects. You know, we've gone to school for it, we've been practicing for a long time. Unless you've really been through something, you
Mm,
don't really understand the emotional component. So, you know, so when I have my clients, people come to meet with me, you know, I kind of share that just to let them know that I've
mm,
sat in their chair and I know
mm.
what it's like, and I know what you're going through on some level. So I have a little, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, I've had experience with that. So, you know, I can speak from experience. And I think that helps. You know, when I was a young lawyer, I remember we were dealing with a custody issue, and I had an attorney say to me, "You don't understand, you don't have children." And I got my dander up and I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing. You know what? In hindsight, she was right. You know,
Yeah.
when you go through life experiences, you just have greater depth. And it's not a knock on anyone who, you know, might not have gone through that or might not have children or whatever the case may be, but you definitely take on a different perspective by your own life experiences. So, you know, that was, I guess, another setback I can think of. And another setback I mentioned, I'd gone to a firm for 3 years. You know, that
Mm.
those 3 years weren't great professionally for me, but you know what? I got a lot of perspective, and it was a really great lesson and put me at peace with certain things of where I want my career to go. So I'm not upset that I did that. I would have liked for it to work out. Didn't work out to my liking, but I took a lot of lessons from that. And I feel like I've grown tremendously because of it, from all those experiences.
What type of people would you say you vibe out with? And I know it's a generalized statement, but are you noticing sort of having certain traits, and some you just don't?
What was that? I didn't hear the first part. What's that?
Like, what type of people would you say that you vibe out with, that you connect
Yeah.
with easily?
Hmm.
Or do they
You
have
know,
a certain type of characteristic?
I think people that are not too showy, that are down to earth,
Hmm.
that are good people, nice people. I know that kind of seems like an obvious answer, but I don't care where we're going or what we're doing. If you're a good person, you're a good person. We can be going for a slice of pizza, or we can be going for an expensive meal somewhere. But I just like down to earth people, I think is the best way to just describe it.
That's actually a great test. If you go out with, it doesn't have to be a date. I mean, you can have a business lunch or whatever in a
Mhm.
restaurant, is, how they treat the staff and, the,
That's
the,
right.
the waiters and, or whether it's, the valet, a parking attendant. And yeah, that,
That's
that
right.
actually tells me a lot.
Yeah, 1,000%. I remember in one of my first jobs, I remember the bookkeeper said to me, "Oh, you know, you're a new lawyer. You're going to end up like the rest of them, and you're going to act like the rest of them." And I don't think that was said in a positive light. And I said to her, I said, if I ever start acting like that, you can slap me upside the head, and you can tell me I'm acting I'm not acting in a nice way. And when I left that job, I remember I went back into her and I said, "Do you remember what you said to me when I started?" And of course, she didn't remember. I said, "You said if I ever started to act like everybody else, you know, you're going to tell me." I said, "Did you ever have to tell me?" She goes, "No, you never acted that way. Never,
Yeah.
ever, ever." So, yes, you always want to, yeah, again, it doesn't matter if it's, the parking attendant or the surgeon or whatever it might be. You treat everybody with kindness and respect.
No, that's beautiful. No,
Yeah.
I completely understood what you meant when you said just nice, nice person. And I think it starts there. I think when you have respect for others, regardless of, their profession or who they are, where they come from,
Yep.
it makes the connection just easy and genuine. And yeah, good energy, good energy. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. With what we do, there's so much bad energy, and people are going through obviously such a trying time and a
Yeah,
stressful time, and one of the worst times of their life. And death is obviously terrible. There's a finality to that. Unfortunately, with a divorce, things go on. There's not sometimes there's not closure on that. So,
Mm.
you just need to be cognizant of that and, try and understand everyone.
Yeah, and with your experience and your perspective, and I don't want to say something that may not, ring true, but it seems to me that
Mhm.
like you almost lean into what's in front of you, that you're not shying away from it. You understand that this is temporary. They're going through stuff and acting from a fear, unless they're a complete douchebag, obviously, and
Right,
controlling,
right,
you
right, of
can,
course.
you
Yep.
can discern those two. But if somebody's genuinely afraid, you know what that's like, right? Losing
Yes.
control and yeah, I've been through it too, so I know what you're talking
Yep.
about. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I can, I can tell people if they are, you got to try and push them over the finish line. And if it's writing one more check and it's going to, um, settle the case out, and I'm not here to count anybody's money, but if it's an inconsequential amount to you, just get done. Be done. Move
Yeah.
on with your life. You can't find happiness and you can't get to the other side until you're done. And you'll find happiness and you'll get there and you'll get through it, but you have to close this chapter first because it's whether you realize it or not, it's holding you back mentally, it's holding you back professionally, and you just we have to get you through to the other side as quickly as possible, whatever that takes.
Oh yeah, being practical. And we haven't even started talking about the opposing counsel. There's no excuse.
No,
Yeah,
no, no.
but
It's this job is so hard.
it
It's
is.
easier when
It
you
is.
have an attorney that you can deal with on the other side, and you just know that there won't be any additional nonsense than the case already presents itself. And if you have a good lawyer on the other side and a reasonable lawyer on the other side and somebody that you work well with, the clients are going to benefit from that. And they're going to benefit tremendously from that because there won't be additional monies and time and stress wasted with lawyers fighting at all.
Yeah.
They parties do enough fighting on their own. You want to make sure that the attorneys can get along so we can streamline whatever has to be done to either bring the case to trial or more preferably settle the case.
So what do you enjoy doing when you're not working?
What do I enjoy doing? Well, I guess I bleed orange and blue. Whether it's the Islanders, the Mets, or the Knicks. Um, I really enjoy going to, different sporting events. I really enjoy going to concerts. I'm a very big Bruce Springsteen fan. I love
Ooh.
going to his shows. Love going out to good restaurants. Love spending time with friends and family, and really just decompressing from the day to day because it is so stressful. So I try to keep myself busy and doing those things, sporting events, concerts, dinner with friends, going to the beach. I find that kind of recharges me and it gives me a nice, a well-needed break from the week.
Do you remember your very first concert?
I think my very first concert was, I think it was a Billy Joel concert. I would say my first big concert, I would say, yes, I would say it was a Billy Joel concert. And it was at Nassau Coliseum. And that was probably my first big rock concert that I really enjoyed. Yes. Yes. It was
What was
great.
that? What was that like to be so close to a big time celebrity like
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, I've always loved music. Growing up, I loved music, and that continues to this day. Um, I find, listening to music is a release, and it can calm you, it can get you excited, it can make you introspective if you hear certain lyrics. But like going to a sporting event, the energy and at a concert, you feel that music, you feel the drum. It's one of the best things that I can do, and I love going, and I love going to concerts to this day. It's it's a welcome release.
Do you ever jam in a car, like to music? Do you ever sing when you're in a car by yourself?
Yeah, yes, that happens from time to time. Yes, it does. The music's always going. I always have music on in the house. There's always
Oh,
music on in the car. I could be playing the drums on the steering wheel. It's possible. My daughter said to me the other day, I had tickets to see Bruce Springsteen, and I saw him at UBS Arena. And then I had an extra set of tickets to see him at Barclays Center, and I was probably going to sell them. It was the same concert, but my daughter, who's going to be 15, she's, "I'll go see Bruce Springsteen with you, Dad." I said, "Well,
oh,
then we're going." And it was so much fun to take her to the show, and then she said to someone, she said, "I've never seen Dad so happy. Dad's so happy when he's
wow,
at the concert." So
wow.
she has my love of music as well. And if we have a road trip somewhere, we'll have music on. I think, I always tell the story. There was a Dua Lipa song where she sampled, I guess, 4 or 5 Elton John songs. And I was driving
Yep.
my daughter up to Westchester for something, and she loved that song. I said, "Okay, now I'm going to play you the 5 songs that she sampled in that song." So yeah, so it's great. It's really great.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's one of the regrets I do have. I've never been to Elton John's concert. He is
Mm,
amazing. Amazing.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
no, it's great. It's great. That, and and sporting events, all of that is really a great release. Some of the best memories I have with my son and daughter are, taking them to Islander games and really enjoying. It's really good family bonding for
You know what?
sure.
You just reminded me, Glenn and I went to see Knicks, but we're talking several years ago. And my first
Yeah.
time at the Garden. And
Mm,
so you stand up, listen to the national anthem, and it's quiet. And actually, they were giving, they're honoring, I think, what were they honoring? I think maybe the first responders. So, I mean, everybody's
okay.
standing up, quiet. And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I hear this like a hardcore rap. And I
Mm.
look next to and I look at Glenn, and he had his phone in the pocket and he was coming out of his phone. I don't know what we were
Yeah.
looking at. I'm like, oh God, but it was so loud. Make sure
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll play you that video. It was so funny.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and that energy, this is interesting. So I grew up in Europe, not in
Right.
United States, and grew up on,
Hmm.
soccer a little bit. I was raised by a single mom, so not really televised sports that much, and
Yeah.
definitely have never been to a stadium until
Hmm.
I came to the States and
Yeah.
went to a couple of football games. And to me, it was like, what is such a big deal? I almost
Hmm.
thought it was mildly fanatical, but as
Yeah.
and I lived in Denver for a
Right.
while, and I
Hmm.
realized when I went to one, there was a preseason game, and it was the end of summer, and I saw families with kids of all ages, people of all
Yeah.
ages, and it was very communal. It didn't matter where you're
Yes.
from, what do you believe in. People came together.
I remember telling my children the Islanders had made a big run, and I was getting tickets for all the games for us to go to with, friends and family. And, I pulled my kids aside at one point, and I said, a couple of things, guys. I go, number one, this doesn't happen very often. Our team is going on a run, and this is very exciting. I said, and number two, people don't get to go to a lot of these games. We didn't just go to one game, we went to many games. So just remember that, and trying to impart that. And yes, it's just such a great communal atmosphere, and a lot of bonding time, whether
Yeah.
it's, again, going to a sporting event, or you're going to a concert, or you're going to the beach with them, whatever you can do to spend time with them is really special.
Yeah, you got it. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you find out kids care very little about stuff and what they remember. Certainly, they do like it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that, maybe temporarily, but they will remember experiences, always, always. And it didn't
Yes.
matter, right? What type of experience. And look, even doing the work that you do, and you have two parents, and, maybe they cannot each equally, spend the same amount of money or give their children the same type of experiences, right? You have the weekend mom or weekend dad, or what have you, and so it's not a competition.
Yeah.
And I've learned too, it didn't matter if you gave kids a card,
No.
a box to play with, and then you went to the park and you fed birds and went on a little hike, and then the other maybe took them to something
Yep.
that's a little more expensive. It didn't really matter. They just want to experience it. That's
No.
all.
That's right. That's right. Experiences, spending time with them. Again, it can be, it can be, something that isn't expensive. It can be something expensive. You just want to spend time with them because
Yeah.
you can't get that back. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have such a wealth of, perspective and experiences, and you're so generous and open. Jerry, kind of on a, you're also very charitably, minded. I'm curious, how did you get involved, and why, with the We Care?
Sure. I was active in the bar association, and at one point, Steve Schlissel had come to me and said, "I want to put you on the committee for the golf outing," and I said, "Okay, that'd be great." So, every year We Care has a golf outing, and we're on two different courses, and we raise over $400,000 for charities, and that money goes right back out because the bar association picks up the administrative costs. So I started, working on the golf committee, and then eventually I got put on the We Care board, and now I'm one of the co-chairs of the golf committee, and I just think it's a great organization. Where we're very fortunate in what we do, and we make a nice living, and we work hard, but we do well. But you need to give back, and whether you're giving back time or money, whatever, it could be both. It's always important to give back to those that are less fortunate, and We Care is such a special organization, because all of the money goes back. We see a lot of organizations where there are high administrative costs and a lot of money goes to salary, and they're big organizations. We Care is such a smaller grassroots organization, and we give to a lot of grassroots organization where the money really makes a difference, and it's very, very rewarding to be able to work on that.
I love what you said about, you make good living and it's important to give back. And you're right, doesn't matter what it is, time, money, just sharing
Yep.
that. And it's a great example for your kids as well. And
Yes.
when I started this, I wanted to also show to the public about the so many roles that you play. It's not just about splitting the assets. It's really shepherding them through this very difficult process. But underneath all that, you're real human beings, parents with needs and fears, and generous and charitable hearts and minds, and I think that's really important. It's really important role. And so on, that's one of my favorite questions to kind of get more insight into your mind. But someone with your experiences, on a parting note, what would be your advice to incoming attorneys?
Sure. I mean, look, being a lawyer it's a hard profession. It's a hard job. The work just doesn't end at the end of the day, right? The bell doesn't ring 5 o'clock and your work is done for the day. Your work is never done, quite frankly. And the work spills into, before 9 o'clock, after 5 o'clock, it spills into the weekend. Your brain is always worrying and thinking about, what else has to be done. Somebody once said to me, the work's never going to be done. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be on your desk. Your desk is never going to be clear of anything. So, in terms of a young lawyer, you need to work hard. You need to put in the time, and you also need to, you know, get along with your other attorneys and the court, and and not take on your client's persona necessarily. You want to advocate for them 100%. That's our job. And our job is to get their case done and get them, the best deal that we possibly can. But, you want to try and do it with some kindness. You want to do it with some professionalism. Some of my best friends are lawyers, and they're lawyers that I've had cases against, and lawyers that I've worked with. And even from a business perspective, I generate business from other lawyers, other matrimonial lawyers. So, just do the right thing and, treat people with kindness and, work hard to get along with the bench and bar, and obviously advocate for your client, but, do it in a professional way. And I think if you do that and you put in the time, I think you're going to be successful. There are many different ways to be successful. There are many different paths to do that, and you just need to be true to yourself and not try to sell yourself as a different type of lawyer if that's not what's in your DNA, because it's not going to be natural. So really just be true to yourself and be professional and work hard. There's no substitute for hard work.
Oh, that is a great advice. Be true to yourself. You may not know that in the beginning, but as you embark on this journey and you help more families and take on more cases, I think paying attention to what you're experiencing, because you're right, this is a full-time commitment for probably for a very long time. You can't half-ass it. This is you all in.
Right.
This is not a job. Steve
That's right.
Gassman actually said, this is a career, whether you like it or not, because if you don't, rather not do that or do not choose this this field or this area of the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. He's 100% correct. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so
Sure.
much for being here, Jerry, and sharing, your story with us today very generously. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Denise. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And to our viewers and listeners, if you want to learn more about Jerry and what he does, schedule an appointment with him, be sure to click on the link below. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on social media channels. And I always say, until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.